friends, colleagues, and fellow travelers on this unpredictable road called life, I want to start today by asking you to do something uncomfortable. I want you to mentally set aside the polished, glossy version of yourself that lives on LinkedIn. I want you to push past the achievements listed on your CV, the awards on your wall, and the highlights of your social media feed. Instead, I want you to look into the shadows of your career and your personal life. I want you to look at the moments that make you wince when you remember them. The projects that crashed and burned, the interviews where you froze, the businesses that went under, and the relationships you didn't have the maturity to save. Today, we are not here to celebrate your successes. We are here to build something far more valuable, far more honest, and infinitely more powerful: your failure resume. In our culture, we are obsessed with the win. We treat success like a destination and failure like a detour, or, worse, a dead end. We hide our mistakes because we think they diminish us. We believe that if people saw the mess behind the curtain, they would lose respect for the final product. But I am here to tell you that your successes only tell the world what you are capable of doing when everything goes right. It is your failures that reveal who you are when everything goes wrong. A standard resume is a record of your competence, but a failure resume is a record of your character. It is a detailed account of your biggest mistakes, your most public stumbles, and the times you were completely, undeniably wrong. But more importantly, it is a ledger of the lessons that a victory could never teach you. Success is a terrible teacher. It makes you think you can't lose. Failure, however, is the most rigorous professor you will ever have. Think about the first time you truly failed at something you cared about. Maybe it was a startup that drained your savings, or a promotion you were certain you'd get that went to someone else. In that moment, the sting is sharp. There is a sense of shame that feels heavy in the chest. We tend to internalize it. We don't just say, "I failed." We say, "I am a failure." But the concept of the failure resume is designed to break that spell. By writing down our mistakes, we externalize them. We look at them objectively. We stop seeing them as stains on our identity and start seeing them as data points in our evolution. When you list your mistakes, you realize that you survived them. The world didn't end. You are still standing. And in that realization lies a profound sense of freedom. If you have already faced the worst-case scenario and lived to tell the tale, what is there left to be afraid of? The problem with a traditional resume is that it is a results-oriented document. It focuses on the what. The failure resume focuses on the how and the why. It forces you to perform an autopsy on your errors. When you look at a major mistake through the lens of growth, you begin to see patterns. You might realize that your biggest failures didn't come from a lack of talent, but from a lack of ego control, or perhaps from a fear of asking for help. A win masks these flaws. When you succeed, you don't ask yourself why, you just celebrate. But when you fail, you are forced to look in the mirror. You are forced to dismantle your process, your assumptions, and your biases. This is where true wisdom is forged. Wisdom is not the absence of mistakes. It is the integration of the lessons learned from them. The most successful people in the world don't have shorter failure resumes than you do. They have much, much longer ones. The difference is that they didn't let those pages stay blank. They filled the lessons learned column with a kind of insights that you can't buy in an MBA program or find in a self-help book. They learned that resilience isn't about bouncing back to where you were before. It's about being transformed into someone who can handle even more. Every entry on your failure resume is a badge of courage. It means you were in the arena. It means you took a risk. It means you were willing to be wrong in the pursuit of being right. As we move forward, I want you to stop running from your shadows. I want you to embrace the mess, document the struggle, and realize that the person you are becoming is being built, brick by brick, out of the rubble of your mistakes. When we begin to fill out the second column of our failure resume, the part that asks what we learned, we find that the most profound lessons are usually the ones that hurt the most. Success often teaches us to be arrogant. It whispers that we have a golden touch and that our intuition is infallible. But failure teaches us the vital art of humility. It teaches us to double-check our math, to listen to the dissenting voice in the room, and to respect the complexity of the world. When you fail because you were too proud to ask for advice, that mistake goes on the resume. But next to it, the lesson is etched in stone. Vulnerability is a prerequisite for growth. You realize that the strongest leaders are not those who know everything, but those who are secure enough to admit what they don't know. This is a lesson you can read 1,000 times in a book, but you will never truly own it until you have felt the weight of a collapse caused by your own ego. Consider the successful project where everything went according to plan. What did it teach you? Likely, it taught you that your current system works. It reinforced your status quo. It kept you inside your comfort zone. Now, consider the project that blew up in your face. That failure forced you to innovate. It forced you to look at your resources in a new way. It forced you to pivot, to scrap old ideas, and to find a plan B that you never would have looked for otherwise. This is the hidden gift of the failure resume. It tracks the birth of your creativity. Necessity is the mother of invention, but failure is the midwife. Most of the world's greatest breakthroughs were actually errors that someone had the presence of mind to study. If you aren't failing, you aren't experimenting. If you aren't experimenting, you aren't growing. Your failure resume is proof that you are still an explorer, not just a settler in the land of the good enough. There is also a specific type of emotional intelligence that only comes from losing. When you have tasted the bitterness of a public defeat or a personal rejection, your capacity for empathy expands. You become a better mentor, a better friend, and a more compassionate leader. You no longer look at someone else's struggle with judgment because you see your own reflection in their eyes. On your failure resume, you might list a time when you failed to lead a team effectively. The lesson recorded there isn't just about management techniques. The lesson is about the human heart. You learn that people don't follow titles, they follow integrity, and they follow people who understand what it's like to fall. Your mistakes strip away the armor of perfection, making you more relatable and more authentic. In a world of filtered images and curated lives, your failure resume is your most authentic document. It says, "I have been in the trenches, I have been wounded, and I am still here." Furthermore, the failure resume teaches us the difference between persistence and pivoting. We are often told to never give up, but sometimes the greatest lesson a failure can teach us is that we were headed in the wrong direction. There is a specific kind of bravery in looking at a failing endeavor and saying, "This isn't working and I need to stop." That isn't quitting, that's intelligence. When you document these moments, you begin to see that some of your biggest losses were actually the universe's way of redirecting you toward your true purpose. You might have failed at being an accountant, only to discover that your passion for storytelling was waiting for you all along. That failed career path wasn't a waste of time, it was a necessary elimination process. Every no on your failure resume brings you closer to a more meaningful yes. We must also talk about the concept of skin in the game. When you have a long list of failures, you have earned your scars. Those scars are your credentials. They prove that you didn't just watch from the sidelines. You engaged with life. You took the hits. There is a certain quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can handle a loss. When you are no longer terrified of failing, you become dangerous in the best way possible. You become willing to take the big swings. You become the person who can stay calm when the market crashes or the strategy fails, because you've seen this movie before. You know that failure is a season, not a permanent climate. Your failure resume is a record of your survival, and survival is the foundation of all future success. It gives you the grit that psychologists talk about, that blend of passion and perseverance that is the #1 predictor of long-term achievement. As we move into the final phase of building this document, I want you to look at the entries you've made so far, not as a list of regrets, but as a map of your personal evolution. Every mistake was a price paid for a piece of wisdom. If you had the choice to go back and erase those mistakes, you would also be erasing the strength you gained from them. You would be a thinner, weaker, less interesting version of yourself. The person sitting here today is the sum of every wrong turn and every bad decision. And if you are still here, breathing and dreaming, then those failures didn't break you. They built you. They prepared you for the challenges that are coming next. They gave you the tools to build something that lasts. As we reach the final stage of constructing this failure resume, we must confront the most difficult truth of all. The entries on this list are not just historical records, they are the architects of your future. We often spend our lives trying to build a fortress around our reputation, hoping no one sees the cracks. But the failure resume teaches us that the cracks are where the light gets in. When you stop hiding your mistakes and start cataloging them, something miraculous happens to your perspective. You begin to realize that the goal of a well-lived life is not to have a perfect record. The goal is to have a well-used life, a life where you were willing to get your hands dirty, where you were willing to risk being laughed at, and where you had the courage to be a beginner over and over again. This document is a testament to the fact that you refuse to play it safe. The ultimate lesson of the failure resume is that resilience is a muscle, and muscles only grow when they are pushed to the point of failure. Every time you list a disappointment and find the lesson within it, you are performing a mental repetition that makes you stronger. You are training your brain to look for the opportunity in the obstacle. This is the hallmark of the growth mindset. When a person with only a traditional resume hits a wall, they often crumble because their identity is tied to being the best. But when a person with a robust failure resume hits a wall, they smile. They've hit walls before. They know how to climb them, how to tunnel under them, or how to use the bricks from that wall to build a new path entirely. They know that the wall is just another entry for the resume. Another story to tell, another lesson to harvest. I want you to imagine for a moment what it would be like if we all shared our failure resumes openly. Imagine if, instead of just bragging about our wins, we sat down and said, here is where I misjudged the situation. Here is where I let my fear make the decision for me. Here is where I failed a friend. The atmosphere in our workplaces, our homes, and our communities would shift from one of judgment to one of collective growth. We would realize that we are all navigating the same stormy seas, just in different boats. By owning your failures, you give others permission to own theirs. You create a culture where innovation is possible because the cost of making a mistake is no longer social exile or professional death. It becomes, instead, a shared investment in wisdom. You become a leader who doesn't just demand excellence, but one who models the bravery required to find it. Now, as you look at your list, this messy, painful, beautiful list, I want you to ask yourself, what is missing? If your failure resume is too short, it might be a sign that you are playing too small. If you haven't failed at anything significant in the last year, it might mean you are coasting on your past successes. The most vibrant lives are the ones where the failure resume is constantly being updated. It means you are still pushing the boundaries. It means you are still asking, what if? And why not? A blank page in your failure journal is not a sign of perfection. It is a sign of stagnation. The most motivational thing you can do for yourself today is to commit to adding a new entry to this resume soon. Commit to taking a risk so bold that failure is a real possibility. Because if you win, you win. But if you lose, you grow. And growth is the only thing that no one can ever take away from you. As we conclude, I want you to take this concept and make it a living practice. Don't just think about your mistakes, write them down. Give them names, honor them. When you look at your standard resume, Let it remind you of what you can do. But when you look at your failure resume, let it remind you of who you are. Let it remind you that you are a survivor, a learner, and a person of profound depth. The world doesn't need more people who are perfect on paper. The world needs people who are seasoned by experience. It needs people who have been broken and have put themselves back together with the gold of their lessons. It needs people who can look at a disaster and see a classroom. Go forth today and stop apologizing for your stumbles. Stop trying to edit out the difficult chapters of your story. Those chapters are the ones that make the book worth reading. Your failures are not the opposite of your success. They are the fuel for it. They are the grit in the oyster that creates the pearl. Carry your failure resume with pride. Use it as a compass. Let it remind you that every time you fell, you learned how to get up just a little bit faster. And most of all, let it remind you that your value is not found in your trophies, but in your scars. Because those scars are the proof that you lived, you dared, you failed, and you had the incredible, unstoppable courage to keep going. The next time you face a challenge that feels insurmountable, don't ask, "What if I fail?" Instead, look at your failure resume, see how far you've already come, and ask, "What is this about to teach me?" That is the mindset of a champion. That is the heart of a leader. And that is the power of your story. Thank you